In my book, Famous Freemasons Exposed, I showed how Nicholas Copernicus, Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, and Isaac Newton, the four forefathers of the globalist heliocentric doctrine, all posed for Masonic portraits, highlighting various symbols and hand signs denoting their affiliation with the Brotherhood. Galileo poses on a Masonic checkerboard floor, Kepler with the hidden hand sign, and all four of them pose with a Masonic compass and globe while flashing the Masonic M hand sign. Sir Isaac Newton was even knighted by Queen Anne at Trinity's College Masonic Masters Lodge. An inordinate number of NASA astronauts, the current propagators of the globalist heliocentric doctrine, are or were admitted Freemasons as well. John Glenn, two-time U.S. Senator and one of NASA's first astronauts, is a known Mason. Buzz Aldrin Jr., the second man to lie about walking on the moon, is an admitted ring-wearing, hand-sign-flashing 33rd degree Mason from Montclair Lodge, number 144 in New Jersey. Edgar Mitchell, another supposed moonwalker aboard Apollo 14, is an Order of Demolay Mason at Artesta Lodge, number 29 in New Mexico. James Irwin of Apollo 15, the last man to lie about walking on the moon, was a Tejon Lodge number 104 member in Colorado Springs. Don Eisel on Apollo 7 was a member of the Luther B. Turner Lodge number 732 in Ohio. Gordon Cooper aboard Mercury 9 and Gemini 5 was a Master Mason in Carbondale Lodge number 82 in Colorado. Virgil Grisham on Apollo 1 and 15, Mercury 5 and Gemini 3 was a Master Mason from Mitchell Lodge number 228 in Indiana. Walter Schirra Jr. on Apollo 7, Sigma 7, Gemini 6 and Mercury 8 was a 33rd degree Mason at Canaveral Lodge number 339 in Florida. Thomas Stafford on Apollo 10 and 18, Gemini 7 and 9 was a Mason at Western Star Lodge number 138 in Oklahoma. Paul Weitz on Skylab 2 and Challenger is from Lawrence Lodge number 708 in Pennsylvania. NASA astronauts Neil Armstrong, Alan Shepard, William Pogue, Vance Brand, and Anthony England all had fathers who were Freemasons too. The amount of astronauts known to be Freemasons or from Freemasonic families is astonishing. It is likely that more astronauts and people of key importance in NASA are affiliated with the Brotherhood as well, but not so open about their membership. For there to be this many Masons, members of the world's largest and oldest secret society, involved with the promotion and propagation of this globalist heliocentric doctrine from its outset to today, should raise some serious suspicion. C. Fred Kleinknecht, head of NASA at the time of the Apollo space program, is now the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Council of the 33rd Degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry of Southern jurisdiction. It was his reward for pulling it off. All of the first astronauts were Freemasons. There's a photograph in the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. of Neil Armstrong supposedly on the moon's surface in his spacesuit holding his Masonic apron. NASA's logo is a red forked serpent's tongue overlaying the starry heavens. Serpents, and specifically their forked tongues, have long been associated with lying, deceit, cleverness, two-facedness, manipulation, and with Satan, the devil. Why would the National Aeronautics and Space Administration choose this as their official logo? The United Nations, the New World Order government headquarters, built on land donated by 33rd degree Freemason John D. Rockefeller, is represented by a logo and flag which clearly depicts a flat earth divided into 33 sections. There are 33 official degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and the UN flag features a flat earth divided into exactly 33 sections. Why would the United Nations founders choose a logo and flag of a flat earth map divided into 33 sections? How is it that C. Fred Kleinknecht, the head of NASA, retired and immediately became the head of the 33rd degree of Freemasonry? How is it that all the forefathers of the ball earth theory and so many NASA astronauts are all Freemasons? The Masons' esoteric religion, the very basis of their symbols and rituals, is sun worship. From their first day in the lodge, Masonic initiates learn that Freemasonry is all about light, enlightenment, illumination, hence the Illuminati, and hence worship of the sun as the giver of light. Masonic halls are all purposely constructed to correspond with the motions of the sun. They are always situated intentionally facing east towards the sun, with the worshipful master sitting in the far east on a throne engraved with a picture of the sun. The high festival of the Masons is on Christians' St. John's Day, or the 24th of June, otherwise known as Midsummer's Day, when the sun arrives at its annual highest elevation, the summer solstice. Regarding the Masonic rite of circambulation, 33rd degree Freemasonic historian Albert Mackey says, "In Freemasonry, people always walked 3 times round the altar while singing a sacred hymn. In making this procession, great care was taken to move an imitation of the course of the sun. The rite of circumambulation undoubtedly refers to the doctrine of sun worship." Masonry is derived and is the remains of the religion of the ancient Druids, who, like the Magi of Persia and the priests of Heliopolis in Egypt, were priests of the sun. They paid great worship to this great luminary, as the great visible agent of a great invisible first cause. The Christian religion and Masonry have one and the same common origin. Both are derived from the worship of the sun. The difference between their origin is that the Christian religion is a parody on the worship of the sun, in which they put a man whom they call Christ in place of the sun, and pay him the same adoration which was originally paid to the sun. In Masonry, many of the ceremonies of the Druids are preserved in their original state, at least without any parody. With them, the sun is still the sun, and his image, in the form of the sun, is the great emblematical ornament of Masonic lodges and Masonic dresses. It is the central figure on their aprons, and they wear it also as a pendant on the breast of their lodges and in their processions. The sun, as the great visible agent of the Creator, was the invisible object of the adoration of the Druids. All their religious rites and ceremonies had reference to the apparent progress of the sun through the 12 signs of the zodiac and his influence upon the earth. The Masons adopt the same practices. The roof of their temples or lodges is ornamented with a sun, and the floor is a representation of the variegated face of the earth, either by carpeting or mosaic work. The emblematical meaning of the sun is well known to the enlightened and inquisitive Freemason, and as the real sun is situated in the center of the universe, so the emblematical sun is in the center of real Masonry. Only the scientific Freemason knows the reason why the sun is placed in the center of this beautiful hall, says Thomas Paine in his Origin of Freemasonry. The real reason the sun is placed in the center of Masonic halls is because it represents the core of their 5-century-long heliocentric deception. First, the sun worshippers took us off our ancient natural 13-month lunar calendars and replaced them with unnatural, irregular 12-month Gregorian solar calendars. Second, they put the sun into the center of the universe and then convinced people the earth and everything else revolve around it. Third, they made the sun the biggest object in the heavens, supposedly 119 times bigger than the moon, even though we can clearly see they are of equal size. Fourth, they demoted the moon to being a mere reflector of the sun's magnificent light, claiming the moon to have no light of its own. And finally, in 1969, the sun worshippers, aboard a craft named Apollo after the Greek sun god, claimed to land on and thereby spiritually and physically conquer the moon. Tex Mars in Codex Magica says, "The sun has ever been at the center of false religion. The ancient mystery religions venerated the sun, the solar disk, as deity. The Greeks honored Apollo as the child of the sun. The Romans paid homage to Mithra, the sun god. These pagan philosophies form the basis for the worship of the Illuminati and indicate the importance of the sun as a symbol of satanic deity. Now today, the Masons, as did the apostate Jewish elders and priests in the days of Ezekiel, continue to worship Satan the sun god, also called Lucifer or Baal, by other names. The name of their great god Jabulon, which is revealed to the Masons in the higher degrees, is a synonym for the solar deity. 2 of the 3 syllable in the name, Ba and Lan, mean Baal and On, both of which represent sun and fire gods. The winged disc symbol, displayed prominently over the doorway of Masonic lodges, shows a solar disc with eagle's wings and 2 serpents. This ancient symbol was found in Egyptian, Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Hittite, Anatolian, Persian, Native American, Mexican, and Australian tribal cultures, always representative of the sun. Eagles have also long been associated with the sun, since they fly highest, closest to the sun, and they can stare straight into its light. Roman generals kept golden solar eagles atop their rods as a sign of supremacy over the army. In Egypt, Horus the hawk was always symbolized with the sun over his head. The Native Americans also associated eagles with the sun, such as the Abenaki eagle god Kisosin the Sunbringer. NASA's Apollo 11 mission patch symbol shows an eagle landing on the moon. The Apollo 16 and 17 patches also prominently feature eagles. The Apollo 13 symbol shows 3 horses pulling the sun behind them, which references the ancient Greek legend of Helios, the sun god, traveling across the sky in a chariot drawn by horses. In total, NASA supposedly landed 12 men and 0 women on the moon. Since the moon has always been associated with the feminine and the number 13, the sun associated with the masculine, and number 12, putting 12 men on the moon, once again it's symbolic of the Masonic patriarchal brotherhood conquering the divine celestial feminine. This is also the occult reason why Apollo 13 coincidentally had an explosion at 113 on April 13th. William Cooper in Mystery Babylon said, "To make interstellar travel believable, NASA was created. The Apollo space program foisted the idea that man could travel to and walk upon the moon. Every Apollo mission was carefully rehearsed and then filmed in a large sound stage at the Atomic Energy Commission's top-secret test site in the Nevada desert and in a secured and guarded soundstage at the Walt Disney Studios, within which was a huge-scale mock-up of the moon. All names, missions, landing sites, and events in the Apollo space program echoed the occult metaphors, rituals, and symbology of the Illuminati's secret religion. The most transparent was the faked explosion of the spacecraft Apollo 13 named Aquarius, New Age, at 13:13 military time on April 13th, 1970. So why do NASA logos feature serpent tongues and eagles? And why are there an excessive number of Mason astronauts? The eagle-winged solar disk symbol with twin serpents found in every Masonic lodge holds the answer. The double-headed eagle is the official symbol of the 33rd degree of Masonry. The 25th degree of Masonry initiates are known as Knights of the Brazen Serpent, and the 28th degree are known as Knights of the Sun. The religion of the Druids, precursor to modern Masonry, was the same as the ancient Egyptians, where priests ruled from Heliopolis, the city of the sun, a city full of obelisks built for their sun god Ra. David Bay in Freemasonry Proven to Worship Lucifer says, "The Egyptians believed that the spirit of their sun god Ra resides within the obelisk. Therefore, they would worship and pray to the obelisk, always facing east, 3 times daily if possible. The greatest obelisk in the world is the Washington Monument, created by the Freemasons in honor of President George Washington. To see how important the obelisk is to the Mason, you only have to go to a cemetery where Masons are buried and look at the many graves which display obelisk gravestones." And William Cooper again said, "The serpent is universally the symbol of the sun, as the sun was the great enlightener of the physical world, so the serpent was held to have been the great enlightener of the spiritual, by giving mankind the knowledge of good and evil. And according to the Bible, you know who gave man the knowledge of good and evil? Satan, Lucifer. Now if the adepts knew that the sun was a symbol of something that the people would not support, such as a belief that Lucifer, the devil, was the god that they worshipped, they would have to continue with their charade so that the people would not decide to stop worshipping. Because if the sheeple figured it out, they would no longer support their activities. They would have to keep their beliefs from the people and conceal their secret worship in hidden symbols. So sun worship as a religion prospered." The first person to ever present the idea of a sun-centered universe was Pythagoras of Samos in around 500 BC. Pythagoras is also widely recognized by Masonic historians as being the very first Freemason. Master Mason Dr. James Anderson said in his defense of Masonry that, "I am fully convinced that Freemasonry is very nearly allied to the old Pythagorean discipline, from whence I am persuaded it may in some circumstances very justly claim a descent." Master Mason William Hutchinson wrote in his Spirit of Masonry that the ancient Masonic record brings us positive evidence of the Pythagorean doctrine as Basilidian principles making the foundation of our religious and moral duties. Master Mason William Preston wrote that Pythagoras was among the first Masons, but contends in his Illustrations of Masonry that the records of the fraternity inform us that Pythagoras was regularly initiated into Masonry, and being properly instructed in the mysteries of the art, he was much improved and propagated the principles of the order in other countries into which he afterwards traveled. 33rd degree Freemasonic historian Albert Mackey, in his Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, wrote that on his return to Europe, Pythagoras established his celebrated school at Crotona, a Dorian colony in the south of Italy, about 529 BC, much resembling that subsequently adopted by the Freemasons. His school soon acquired such a reputation that disciples flocked to him from all parts of Greece and Italy. Pythagoras taught as the principal dogma of his philosophy the system of metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls. He taught the mystical power of numbers, and much of the symbolism on that subject which we now possess is derived from what has been left to us by his disciples. He was also a geometrician, and is regarded as having been the inventor of several problems. The schools established by Pythagoras at Crotona and other cities have been considered by many writers as the models after which Masonic lodges were subsequently constructed. The disciples of this school wore the simplest kind of clothing, and having on their entrance surrendered all their property to the common fund, they then submitted for 3 years to voluntary poverty, during which time they were also compelled to a rigorous silence. The doctrines of Pythagoras were always delivered as infallible propositions which admitted of no argument. Before admission to the privileges of this school, the previous life and character of the candidate were rigidly scrutinized, and in the preparatory initiation secrecy was enjoined by an oath, and he was made to submit to the severest trials of his fortitude and self-command. He who, after his admission, was alarmed at the obstacles he had to encounter, was permitted to return to the world, and the disciples, considering him as dead, performed his funeral obsequies, and erected a monument to his memory. The mode of living in the school of Crotona was like that of the modern communists. The brethren, about 600 in number, with their wives and children, resided in one large building. They arose before day to pay their devotions to the sun. The meals consisted principally of bread, honey, and water, for though the table was often covered with delicacies, no one was permitted to partake of them. It was in this secret school that Pythagoras gave his instructions on his interior doctrine and explained the hidden meaning of his symbols. There were 3 degrees. The first, or mathematic, being engaged in the study of the exact sciences, and the second, or theoretic, in the knowledge of God and the future state of man. But the third or highest degree was communicated only to a few whose intellects were capable of grasping the full fruition of the Pythagorean philosophy. In addition to these admissions by Masonic historians, the life and work of Pythagoras closely resembles many aspects of the craft, from his obsession with triangles and geometry to his school cult full of initiatory rites and brainwashing. Candidates were rigidly scrutinized, just like candidates for Masonry are given the 3rd degree, i.e. forced to answer many probing personal questions, and are then either given a white ball or black ball by Masons in the lodge, just one black ball resulting in being blackballed or kicked out. If initiated, just like in Masonry, Pythagorean initiates had to swear oaths of secrecy and loyalty, then submitted to various tests, trials, and rituals. The brethren lived like communists and worshipped the sun. Over time, they progressed through a series of 3 degrees, in which only the privileged few in the highest degree learned the truth of the symbols and rituals. The many parallels of the Pythagorean school and modern Freemasonry are far too similar to ignore. Luckily for the world, Pythagoras' heliocentric model of the universe made little headway for almost 2,000 years, until another suspected Mason, Nicholas Copernicus, labored 27 years of his life to create his updated model called the solar system, which also featured a globe Earth revolving around the sun. Born in Prussia in 1472, Copernicus studied philosophy and medicine at Swakova and became professor of mathematics at Rome. The last decades of his life he became obsessed with the ideas of Pythagoras, and when he first presented his heliocentric doctrine to the world, it was condemned as being so heretical that he was imprisoned and released only upon making a recantation of his opinions. He published his famous treatise on the revolution of the celestial spheres in 1543, the year of his death, and even then insisted on their purely hypothetical nature. Copernicus wrote, "The Pythagorean teaching was founded upon hypothesis, and it is not necessary that the hypothesis should be true or even probable. The hypothesis of the movement of the earth is only one which is useful to explain phenomena, but it should not be considered as an absolute truth." David Wardlaw Scott in Terra Firma says, "The system of the universe as taught by modern astronomers, being founded entirely on theory, for the truth of which they are unable to advance one single real proof, they have entrenched themselves in a conspiracy of silence, and decline to answer any objections which may be made to their hypothesis. Copernicus himself, who revived the theory of heathen philosopher Pythagoras, and his great exponent Sir Isaac Newton, confessed that their system of a revolving earth was only a possibility and could not be proved by facts. It is only their followers who have decorated it with the name of an exact science, yea, according to them the most exact of all the sciences. Yet one astronomer royal for England once said, speaking of the motion of the whole solar system, 'The matter is left in a most delightful state of uncertainty, and I shall be very glad if anyone can help me out of it.' What a very sad position for an exact science to be in is this." Lady Blunt, in The Romance of Science, said, "The origin of the globular theory may be traced and shown to be pagan. It was introduced into Egypt by the Greek Pythagoras about 500 BC. He was a native of Samos and a great traveler in his early days. He traveled much in the East, and he imbibed the fallacious idea that the earth and sea together formed a whirling globe, and that the heavenly bodies were other worlds inhabited. Pythagoras returned to Europe and introduced these serious errors into his own country. Newton was no logician, and logic formed no part of his composition. Nor did he profess to possess this quality, which is absolutely essential to a discerner and founder of true science. He spent his whole life in investing, formulating an elaboration which he called the solar system, building upon the mythical fallacies which Pythagoras had brought from the East in the first place, and which had been handed down by Copernicus, Kepler, and Galileo. Without testing the nature of his foundations, he accepted the whole fabrication and took Copernicus's hypotheses all for granted." Gabrielle Henriette in Heaven and Earth said, "Copernicus had evolved another theory, which he also explains in his treatise on the revolution of the celestial spheres, that if a body is to revolve around another, the first one must have a spherical shape and rotate about its axis in the manner of a spinning top. Consequently, in order to make this notion fit in with the movement of the earth round the sun, which he had devised in order to explain the seasons, he suddenly decreed that the earth was round, contrary to the general opinion at the time, and then proclaimed that it had a movement of rotation about its axis. The great inconvenience in this proposition is that the rotation of the earth cannot be seen to exist, either with regard to the position of the sun or clouds during the day, or of the moon and other planets by night. On the other hand, the fact of the immobility of the earth has an immense advantage over the theory of the rotation, in that it can positively be recognized as such, and it can safely be said that if the earth cannot be seen to move, there are 100 chances in 100 that it does not do so. So trust your eyes and trust your experience. Trust your feeling, trust your intuition. Look out, see the horizon, flat. Feel for yourself. You're not spinning around an axis at 1,000 miles per hour, rotating around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour. spiraling around the galaxy at 500,000 miles per hour and shooting off from a Big Bang at 67 million miles per hour? You're not. You're motionless. You're just sitting there. Just sit still. What does that even mean, sit still? You think you could sit still with all those motions? Does it feel like you're moving? Feel that? Same thing you've always felt? Nothing? Ever? Nobody's ever felt movement? Nobody's ever seen the earth move? Nobody's ever seen the earth curve? Maybe you just got fooled by some Masons. Mark Twain said, "It's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled." That's why it's so hard to convince you you've been fooled. You can't possibly believe that you and the rest of the world could have been lied to and deceived by these Masons, the oldest and largest secret society in the world, over 5 million members, all over the world, existing for hundreds of years, but not you, right? They couldn't fool you. Of course you're spinning around. That's what they told you in school. They don't lie to you in school.